won't spend too much time on it, but at the end of this, there will be an activity for you to review some theories of leadership. I'm going to exit out and have each of you review, and then we'll come back and each of you will present on what leadership on the assigned theory. So I state that just so this will be a good opportunity while I'm presenting to maybe make sure you have access to the book. So what is leadership? Now, we can all have our definition about leadership. It's one of those questions that you have probably been asked several times in your undergraduate as well as graduate career. So for the good of the order, let's go ahead and take a stab at it. So often what I state, I try to make this as simple as possible. What I state is when you are at a party and someone comes up to you, that it happens to me at all the parties, and they say, hey, you know, Dr. H, I'm in a discussion. What's leadership? And then you have to define it. What comes to mind? How would you define it? I'm going to start with Amanda. Now, when I state define leadership, I also want you to give me an explanation of how and why. You know, how did you come up with that definition, or why do you feel that that is the definition, just to get us in the practice of being coherent. So Amanda, you're up.
Oh, goodness. I am so tangent-y, so being coherent is something I need to work on. I feel like leadership is applicable to everybody. It just, it is an action to show that you have the ability to make coherent and strategic decisions. You have the ability to keep calm in a situation, to really just, you know, think about things through and really help lead people to find a decision. How I got that answer is just observation from my current leadership, and I have appreciated the way they have approached leadership.
Good. Now, see, that's a great approach. You know, it's hard to get out of the gate. Gave us an explanation, and then even if you have to repeat, you know, why or how, it just helps us get into the mindset. I would write Post-it notes and put it on my computer, and one Post-it note would say just write, and the other Post-it note would say don't forget how and why. Just as a reminder, you did a really good job. That's good. And you also bring us up to another question is sometimes we know the answer to the defining leadership by what is good leadership or what is bad leadership. So keep that in mind when you're answering the question too. So up next, Howard, how we doing? You ready?
I like Amanda's answer. You know, I believe there's a vast difference between a leader and a manager.
Okay.
I think leaders are those that kind of set a tone, set a pace, and they're not afraid of a little risk. They're not afraid of meeting a challenge or an adversity because it creates opportunity. So I think a leader has kind of that 60-foot ceiling view, or 60,000 ceiling view. I think they kind of can see the whole picture, even though maybe it's not right in front of them.
Okay.
And kind of how I think I've kind of come to that perspective is just that, you know, I've been around a lot of leaders, and I've been around a lot of managers too, and I've got to, you know, see the pros and cons of both. And I just think most of it's just through experience.
All right. Good. And there's nothing wrong sharing the experience or even reflecting on that, because if your career is like mine, really, look, I'm a student of management. I love the field. I'll study it. I would rather read books on management and leadership than any other type of book. But I often will refer to my experiences and maybe my mentoring and what I deem to be quality mentoring. when it comes to making those decisions, especially the decisions about, that have to put out a fire. So I think that's great. Howard, I would follow up with this, going back, building off the manager or the leader. This may be a little morbid, but it's the one I use, so bear with me on that. So if we're going to carve your tombstone, all right, you lived a successful, rich life. You lived to 135, all right, fulfilled, no worries. But on your tombstone, we have to chisel out something. Would you rather it says, and you don't only have these two options, here lies the greatest leader? Or would you have it say, here lies the greatest manager? Which of the two would you choose? There's no.
I think so. I don't want to escape the question. Kind of depends on my career, right? Am I a manager of the Cubs, or am I, the president of the United States? So, but I would prefer here lies the greatest leader.
Right.
And although I enjoy following sometimes too, that's where I learn the most. So, yeah, definitely a leader for me.
And I'm with you on that too. And it's always the graduate student that inevitably puts in the word depends. Well, it depends. I mean, and I get that. And so, and I respect the way you approach that too. Often what I hear in the years of teaching that, when I ask that question, is just like you, here lies the greatest leader. And even if you were the manager of the Cubs, you still have to, have the leadership skills within it. What Yuko and Martin often do with this book is they make reference to us as managers. And I'm especially in the first 3 chapters, I'm a little taken back by that, because they make a significant point, just like you did, Howard. There is a difference between a leader and a manager. And the leadership traits, in my opinion, have to be, within the manager. I don't know a lot of job titles that start with, leader. I know a lot of job titles that have a manager in it, of course. So, but I often ask the question, if the textbook would bring manager as your example, and if most of the jobs are going to be manager, why is it that we answer, what's the value of answering, here lies the greatest leader? What does that mean to us? And to me, it's often cognitive. It's often a belief or a feeling, and that's real. I believe it's real because it relates to the influence. But you brought this up, manager and leaders, and so I wanted to go down that route a little bit. But let's circle back and go back to, you're at this party, someone comes up to you and says, Brittany, maybe one of your kids there, go, Mom, define leadership. What do you say?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I think it's somebody that can motivate the people who are following them and make decisions for the greater good, pretty much selfless, and someone who's decisive. And I think that because, well, first of all, probably because all the training I got in the military about what a leader is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So preconditioned. And then just watching bad leaders or managers that try to lead without leadership skills, mm-hmm. Just kind of showed me the difference between what a leader is and then what one is not.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a bit about that, because that's consistent too, and it started with Amanda. But Brittany, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for the service with the military. In your training or in your professional experience, how did you know that the leader was bad?
They couldn't get anybody to follow them, and then it would turn more into threats than motivation.
Okay, so is there any time in the military, let's stick with that example, where that style of leadership would be good leadership? maybe not get it, but influence, but the threats. So let's focus on the threats.
I think it can be effective if you're just goal oriented. I think you can reach your goal by threatening people, but I don't think you're necessarily leading them. Like, I don't think anybody's following you. I just think they're trying to survive at that point.
Okay. What comes to my mind, and I have not served, nor have I ever experienced, but going to basic training, and I know it's completely different than when my father was in the Korean War. All right, back then, drinking water was a weakness, when he played college football. But there has to be a transition. Like you're making a life choice going from private sector, being a civilian, to that in the military. I mean, that's a real switch. What type of leadership was experienced there by you or by anybody who might have served? Is it, because what I see is a lot of, and this is just, I know it's changed, but a lot of abrasive type, making the adjustment. What type of leadership did you get there?
So when I first got there, you're just looking for direction. So I guess to me, a leader is somebody who provides direction, because that was one of the things that they did. Even though they were yelling and screaming, what you were actually needing from that leader at that time was direction. So I think it's relative to the situation, but so that's what they provided. And then as you get into your flight, so basically you get broken down into your groups that you'll be with the whole time, is you see the difference between those people who will pull somebody along with them and say, you got one more push up in you, come on, or let's keep running, and then the people who just kind of quietly run. So the leaders there were the people who could motivate people to keep going or reach whatever the goal was, no matter what the situation was. We could be in a bad situation, which is was just getting yelled at, but any bad situation, but you still got that person that can help you stay focused on the goal. And so to me, that's what a leader was, the person that can get you to the goal and keep you motivated to want to even get there.
Okay. Stephanie, I'd take a break off. Brittany, that was a really good answer, and I want Howard and Amanda, let's go back to Amanda. Amanda, we've gone the gauntlet. You've heard the other two. Howard started off by saying, I like where Amanda was going, not saying that Brittany didn't like that, but what's your opinion now? Has it changed?
No, I agree. It's just been expanded. I don't think anything changed. I think leaders, need to be in service of others. I think what Brittany says is incredibly true. It's more effective to motivate than to punish or threat. And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Howard, how much of who you are, maybe how you were brought up, or the life that you have now, influence your definition of leadership?
I think it contributed to it greatly.
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest time, I grew up in a household that was kind of single parent. It was, you kind of set some ground rules, set some expectations, but it was more of a kind of live by fire. You see how things go, and they mentor by their examples. And so I felt like my mom was a really good leader. She wasn't actually a very good manager at certain times, but she could always put the foot in front of the next one, despite maybe the adversity she was going through. Again, managing it all was a challenge, but I think that really contributed to how I define leadership and kind of who I am as a person now. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Am I off subject?
No, it's perfect. I mean, if you follow, or if you've ever studied educational philosophy, like how we learn, you go and you start back to the very beginning. John Locke, he brought up I forgot the French way, but the blank slate, in which we all have as small children, we come out with this blank slate, and then our life experiences starts to chisel into this blank slate what we recall and what we know. And that's how learning begins. And so if you've never experienced, in the case of Brittany, you know, and giving the example of the military, and not saying that you haven't, but if you're new to that, how do we know if leadership is good or bad in that area? If you've never taken a course, we know this because we've seen this throughout our development. And what I would say is sometimes, and I can look back in my career where I would say this person was a really bad leader. I just had a boss that I felt was a real bad leader. But after he retired and then was no longer with, and I was in that person's position, all of a sudden that new information, he may have been a bad leader at that time, but I wasn't aware of the trials and the tribulations and the factors of that job. And so here it is and so I had new respect. I don't know if I necessarily agreed with his leadership after that, but I had new respect for what he was trying to accomplish. And so here's what's important about this first step about leadership. One, we need to make sure that we are able to, as executives, to stand forward and explain how and why. Employees want to know that. That's the age that we live in now. It's not autocratic anymore. We have to bring everybody in, but you also have to keep the information close to the vest, if you will, and not give away all the decision rights of being a leader. And just remember that as humans, as we advance on, it's fine if our definition changes, because the more information you have, the easier it is to make, to understand. And so that's why I love it's a basic question. It sets the foundation, but it also tells you what I'm expecting. I'm expecting you to bring your experience, your background, as well as the research from the book and from outside, and continue to have this discussion of growth to make you successful as leaders moving forward. Now, what's fascinating, and thank you all for that, what's fascinating is, okay, so the text gives you a definition early on from 1959. Always, it seems, the concept of leadership eludes us or turns up in another form to taunt us again with its slipperiness and complexity. So we have invented an endless proliferation of terms to deal with it, and still the concept is not sufficiently defined. I mean, that is Oscar worthy, of a description. And I'm sorry to say that none of you even came close to that definition, and I am fine with that. However, if you can use the word slipperiness and any answer to defining and in your classes moving forward, I will send you bonus points. I don't know, but I just love that definition. And look, the text talks about this in chapter 1. It talks about leadership. It's not easy to define. It's impossible to define. Yuko and Martin state that most definitions involve just one thing, a process of influence. It's exerted over others. So here's what I'm asking you, and let's start with, let's keep the order. Amanda, you're up. Why is it impossible? Why is leadership? We know what good leadership is. At least we can recognize it. Why is it impossible to have a definition? And what's the value of influence on this? So why? Amanda, why?
I think it was said earlier. I think when you said the MBA students use the word depends a lot, depends on the person. What do you need out of life? What do you need out of a leader? And I think that's so individualistic that defining what true leadership is not something that is easily definable.
Okay. All right. A nice job, reverting back, tapping into that depends. That's great. Listening. I like it. It's good. And using that. Let's build off that, Howard, though. All right, so she used, it depends on the situation. It depends on the person. But as scholars, our job is to survey and observe and collect this data You're telling me we can't come up with a agreeable definition? Why? Howard?
I think that the task is too internal. And I think Amanda and Brittany have already touched on this a little bit, but to define a leader would be almost a kind of a great mistake for those around them if that leader was only proven to be a leader to one person but failed to the others. Mm-hmm. So, and I think we all kind of experience this in our jobs, but a lot of us experience a leader if they're experiencing job satisfaction. Oh, they're a great leader because I'm a happy employee. But are they contributing to the core objectives of that organization? I think that perspective of someone may be a leader to me, but they're failing maybe in another area. I think a leader has to be a successful person by virtue of leadership. You don't want to lead people into a fire if they're just going to burn up. You want to lead them into a fire that they can put out and that they can. So I think it's a really big challenge to define leadership because we all have this internal dialogue of what the definition of a leader is based off what you mentioned earlier, our own predispositions, our own, nurtures, our own upbringing. So I think that's the greatest challenge. But as long as we're willing to listen to each other and say, hey, here's my experience with their leadership, it can be enlightening. You can see that come to fruition. Oh, I never experienced them like that. That may bring about some mutual understanding of, hey, that's a great leader.
Good. Yeah, Amanda and Howard, those are great. Brittany, let me ask you though, so based off everything that we talked about, do we need a definition? What's the purpose? I mean, why is a definition important or why is it not important?
I think a definition is important because it just gives people some type of understanding of what it even is. Mm-hmm. Without the definition, you could literally say anything was a leader. Mm-hmm. So it just gives some type of foundation, but it doesn't. I think it's subjective because most people feel like a leader's outcome should be positive. And when you give that definition, so by our definition or by my specifically definition, the one that I gave you, you could consider Hitler a good leader. But then some people wouldn't because of the outcome that came, but people followed him and people were motivated behind him. And those are things that I actually said make a good leader. So I think because it's so subjective, it's hard to give a definition that people would be, people could agree on. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's important to have some type of definition just so because if you don't, then I don't know, it's just a word, I guess. How do you have a word without a definition? Kind of.
No, those are all great. I love this. We're doing great. So Brittany, to build off that, and I like how you bring up that, Adolf Hitler example that comes up a lot. You're right. A definition serves the purpose of a foundation. And as managers or executives moving forward, you have to, and the text talks about this, you have to have some key performance indicators and to measure your success, right? And I teach this from a standpoint, and when I'm training my managers and others, is that as decision makers, call them leaders, call them managers, you have the decision right to make this final decision. And it will always boil down to a yes or a no, a true or a false. It's a binary question. Now, I've gotten into debates about this, and I usually incorporate cost benefit analysis and economics and blah, 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 blah. And that's not the purpose of this, other than when I'm sharing information and content for the class, you want to keep in mind that the philosophy that I take is that it's binary. That if I ask you a question, you should get enough information that it will either be a yes or no. Do you want to go to the movie? Yes or no. Do you want to buy the car? Yes or no. Do you want to stay awake in this class? Yes or no. Hopefully, yes. The purpose of it is to build down the foundation to a binary question, so we know what we're looking at, right? The next thing about that builds on to it being subjective, builds on to the fact that it's more of an art. It's not a science. And therefore, if it's an art, it's going to tap into more of our emotions, more of our cognitive challenges. And it also means that it's going to evolve. So when we're studying executive leadership, establishing a foundation, we're looking at this text. I'm telling you, there's nothing other than adding more tools to your toolbox, because the situations change, the environment changes, and that's okay. That's what we need to do at this level of our education. When you're finished with this master's degree, you're going to be the next vice president, maybe the next, commander in some field. You're no longer going to be an undergraduate. You're going to be a master's student with a master's in business. And that's a cool feeling. But I want this class, especially for the four of you, I want this class to be, how can a training zone for that next area? So again, there's not a binary definition. Does this meet the definition of leadership? You can't answer it that way. But you also need to go through the class knowing that at the end, the solutions are going to be your solutions. Nothing in the text, nothing I can provide. That's why it's important to do that self-assessment in the leadership manifesto, because I want you to walk away knowing yourself more on that. So our text talks about good answers to all three of you. Thank you. The text, actually, Yuko Martin says, all right, so for this book, here's our definition. All right, so we're going to adopt this definition just for the purpose of the class, all right, and moving forward. Leadership is the process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done and how to do it, and the process of facilitating individual collective efforts to accomplish shared objectives. Now, congratulations, all three of you. When asked what a defined definition, you hit upon their definition, all right? So not from 1959. And this makes a little sense. I mean, it's fine that it shows the evolution of our knowledge and learning from 59 to now. But again, we start talking about influence. It seems like influence is key. How do I influence my tax deductions to mow the yard? Well, I might pay them. I might threaten them. But I hope that I can get to the place where I can just build a relationship with them, that I know them, and they understand why the yard needs mowed. Maybe that's a pipe dream, but so I often explain the how and the why. You see, influence is a cognitive exercise. It is something that we have to process and develop our understanding. And now the text gives you, table 1-2 gives you ways that leaders can influence organizational effectiveness, right? And that from objectives to strategies to trust to operations to enlisting support. Here's my answer. You want to use these, all right? You want to refer to them. And what they've done is they've done a qualitative study, or they've done a descriptive analysis of literature and say, here's the best practices that they've identified. Here's the practice that I feel is the most effective, my opinion. You got to know your employees. You got to schedule time for one-on-ones. You're going to get sick of me saying that. One-on-ones. Think about it. If I'm bringing in an employee and I've gone through the process of hiring them, and then I'm going to make a decision of how to train them, and I'm going to pay them, and I'm going to give them benefits. Why is it that I only do an annual evaluation of their performance? Why is it that I have to, make a judgment about whether or not you're going to keep your job only once a year? How fair is that? We don't spend enough time doing the one-on-ones overall. Maybe you've got that experience, but from my experience, we don't spend enough time doing the one-on-ones. If you want to develop influence on others, the influence has to be organic. How's it organic? is just like growing a plant, just like raising children. It is something that you have to be both feet in, invested, and develop. That doesn't mean you got to do everything that the child or the employee wants, but you have to know them. You have to do the one-on-ones, build that relationship. If you build that relationship, and Amanda, specifically going back to your point, it doesn't, you don't have to incorporate depends anymore. Imagine if you have the relationship with the person that reports to you, and don't get me wrong, there's planning and other things, but the blind trust that this person is, whatever the decision you make, that leader or that follower will be influenced by you if you have that strong relationship with it. It's not a question anymore if you have that, but it takes hard work. It takes dedication and a commitment. So we're going to watch a video after our break, a little bit more about this. But I want to stress that. So decisions that we make as a manager or as a leader come down to a binary question, a yes or a no. We have to have a foundation or everything follows or falls through. And you also have to know your employees. And I know a lot of managers or leaders that feel that they're good leaders and good managers, but yet don't know their employees. And that's not possible. So now we go into leadership theories within the chapter. The leadership theories, there are the three types of characteristics of the leader, characteristics of the followers, and the situation. Table 1.3 gives you the characteristics needed to be a good leader. Again, this is over a descriptive of literature that's already been published. We're not going to go into detail of that, other than I want to emphasize confidence and optimism, that third bullet point down. And the reason I emphasize this is because this is going back to your writing and what you submit. This is the time where we take our voice and we make it active. And maybe you've been informed about this in class, but we want to move away from a passive voice in which I believe this should happen, or if he does this, this is possible that it happens. We need to shift away from the passive and go straight to the active. This will happen. This can be possible, or this is going, I'm stuck. This is going to happen. I heard something from the other room and I got my kids. All right. So does that make sense? So I'm going to grade you also on your active voice. Is that new? I only have 3 of you. Is that new? Has that been said before in class? Have they emphasized that at all?
Not much for my classes.
Howard?
Very, very little in my experience from like grading. So, and like engaging interaction, that's a grade, but not as much as maybe you're considering putting into value there.
Okay.
Yes.
And look, this is not, I don't want you like stressing about the writing. Okay. I'm here to develop and coach you up. I just, if you are using an active voice in your writing and you have been coherent with your hows and your whys, you don't need a lot, right? You can make one good point and supported by one good resource and you're done. I don't need a list of resources that support that. This is not a doctoral class. I'm not creating scientists here. I am creating executives. And if you're expecting people to follow you, you have to show the degree of confidence that you've done the research, you have the experience, that they're going to follow you, influence. Because if you give any hint of doubt, or if you backtrack on any of your decisions, which it's not wrong overall, but if you make a pattern of that, you will start losing the dynamics of your organization. 25 years of professional experience tells me that. So I want you to be confident in that. And also note that you could say this will happen, and guess what? I might come back and say, no, it won't. And here's why, or here's how it's not going to happen. That's a dialogue. That's a debate. It's time to switch the gears, if you will, or switch our positioning on that. So, but again, it's not like I feel like I'm making too big of a deal of this. So trust me, we'll work this through. But at the end, I want you to have the confidence that's listed there. Out of this list, characteristics of a leader, Amanda, what other than confidence and optimism and how we've identified or defined, what else stands out to you? Like, yeah, I really agree with that one.
I values, integrity, and moral development really stick out to me. I feel like, the definitions we defined earlier play a huge role in that. You have to, be positive and show that integrity in those moral developments.
Mm-hmm. Good. You don't want anybody stealing, or you don't want anybody lying, taking your credit. I get that. Brittany, all right, so we've talked, I'm going to take values off, confidence off, and I'm taking influence off because we talked about that. What's another one?
Amanda took the best one, but
she does that. I could tell. Come on to her. Go ahead.
Mental models, beliefs, and assumptions. I think that's pretty important. To not bring in sometimes your biases with you when you leave.
All right, good. Are you feeling like let's keep that and let's move on. All right, that's a good one, Brittany. I might come back. And Howard, last one. If we take mental models, influence off, values, confidence, you get the last one here.
I like the skills and expertise. So I think that's what we're here for. We're all probably really good at some of the things that we like to do, but we're mastering that. And so I really like the idea of being kind of an expert in something, and maybe lots of somethings. And I think that's a great value.
And that's actually you folks did great. I mean, because that was the one that if you didn't hit, I was going to cover skills and expertise. Leaders, in my opinion, if you ask me if I'm at the party and they ask me to define, I got to bring in skills and expertise. And that's just because I got to believe in the person. And if they're starting from, if they're, this comes out as ageism, but if they're younger than myself, it's really hard for me to not feel like, or if I'm more experienced, I've been in the job, let's take age off, but I've been in the job longer. It's really hard for me to respect that person immediately if I have to also train them. You know what I'm saying? So the skills and expertise, the degree of skills or expertise, to be able to trust them as a source that could give good advice or solve those problems in face of, especially plans that require a lot of work. I mean, that's a value to me, at least. I agree. Nice job on all of them. Characteristics of a follower. You start seeing a lot of similarities there. I mean, you see traits, confidence, skills. They have attributions or to the leader, about the leader. They can identify with the leader. They're satisfied with the job. Let's go back on that one. Who was it? Was it who brought up, Amanda, was it you who brought up a happy workforce? May not me, or was it Brittany? Happy workforce doesn't necessarily mean that you have a good leader. Someone brought that up.
I'll give credit to Brittany.
I kind of did, I guess.
All right. So yeah, so going back to that, satisfaction with the job and the leader doesn't necessarily mean, as you stated, that the leader's doing a good job. You know, it could just mean like, yeah, I like the leader. He lets me do whatever I want. So that's perfect. Situations. Now, this is where the chapter spends a lot of time talking about the type of situations, from the organization, the size, structure, the culture. It gives you all these examples just to prove what we've been talking about, that it really depends on the environment, that each form of leadership actually will require a different situation or a different theory of belief. The figure 1-2, casual causal relationship, sorry, just shows how everything's interrelated with that. The leader's behaviors and traits, influence the process, how it goes back and forth cycles, and the situation of a variety of variables. You want to note that at the top of at the beginning of this model is the leader's traits and skills. That's going to be the base point. That's what they bring in. And then at the end of it is performance and outcomes. So we're going to watch a video that will talk about that managers' jobs are going to be about results and retentions, and you can't lose sight of that. You do not have leadership if you do not have measuring or assurances. There's no leadership if there's no measuring. There's no, if I say, let's take that hill, if we're not at the top of that hill going from point A to point B, then I'm not leading anybody. You know, I could fail, but you got to have that hill. You got to have that measuring. So never forget about the performance outcome. The only person that can save a leader's manager's job is the manager or the leader. All right, so we're going to take a break, but I'm going to pause you out, and I'm going to have you do your own self-reporting and give us an update on this. So I'll take the first one. The trait approach theory is basically that the leader's traits are rooted to their upbringing. They're born, assumes that they're a born natural leader, which we didn't even talk about, but is it possible for them to be a natural leader? The theory is rather dated. It's not something that you can stand alone. None of these theories, by the way, or leaderships, can we just have them as a standalone. There's integration on that. So we need to have an understanding of all of these that are approach. So Howard, why don't you take behavior approach? Brittany, you take power and influence. And then Amanda, you take number 4, situational approach. It is 7:30 on the dot. So I was going to give you 10 minutes to work on this, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. So we'll come back in 20 minutes. If you'd rather, we could do the break later. I'll give you 10 minutes to work on this, and then we'll come back and present, then do the break. Do you like option 1, in which we do 10 minutes and take a 20-minute time period, or do you want to go work, come back, then break? Option 1, option 2. Just raise your finger. 1 or 2? 1, 1, 1. All right. So it's 7:30. Let's come back at 7:50. We're going to start off with an overview of what you learned on, again, Howard, you're taking behavior approach, power and influence approach, situational approach is Amanda. Not only do you give us a definition, but again, explain the how and the why, make it coherent. And if you, the definitions in the book might need they're going to need a little expanding upon. Okay. So I'll be on the other end. If you have any questions, just chime back in. Okay. All right. So I'll see you in 20 minutes. Bye. All right. So Howard, I believe you were up first with behavior approach. So first define it for us, and then give us a how and why, or how or why, make it coherent. And then how about an opinion, like what your opinion would be?
Yeah, so behavior approach, the definition is trying to focus on the behavior, but trying to focus on the performance or the outcome that a leader possesses or that they achieve.
Okay.
And the how and why, when I kind of dove into a little bit, just did a very amount of little research. Seems like to fully comprehend the behavior approach, they had to kind of unwrap, kind of peel back the layers of the behavior concepts, looking at specific types of behaviors. And, you know, they've kind of looked into some examples. So something like the Myers-Briggs would be kind of a good behavior approach, to try to understand, what type of characteristics do you possess that kind of contribute to your, that will contribute to your performance or outcomes long term.
Yeah.
And then a little bit about opinion. So I like the behavior approach as it applies to leadership. I think that there's a lot of room for growth if you can study yourself and those around you, and you guys can kind of learn you can learn maybe a little bit about yourself that maybe you hadn't really considered just based off your how you like to achieve certain tasks. So,
well, and that's good. That's good. And you're spot on. Let's take one step back, and I hint upon it, but I didn't mention it directly. If we adopt the textbook's 3 approaches of studying a leader, whether it comes to behaviors or traits, the authors give us 3 approach. One would be give them a test, a survey, if you will, like Myers-Briggs. You can observe. You go there and just observe and do some qualitative research. So the survey is quantitative. The fourth is, or the second is qualitative. And then the third, can anybody state what the third was? Does anybody know? It's fine if it's first night. The third would be getting opinions and feedback from others. So we interview your followers, the employees, the stakeholders. So you get that 360 evaluation. You even interview the leaders, all right? So those are the third approach. So based off the behavior approach and the examples given, one can observe that, but often it's going to be used to a survey of information, survey of data will be used for that. So there's a plus and a minus to that. The plus is you get a large pool of data to assess, and when you get a large pool, then you can start talking about significance and whether it's coherent and measurable. The negative to it is just what we've talked about, is it's also doesn't address the subjectivity of leadership and how it depends. So, but good job. All right. Good job. All right. Brittany, you're up. Power influence approach. Give us a definition. Make it coherent, how or why, with an example, and then give us your opinion. That'd be great.
So power influence approach seeks to explain leadership effectiveness in terms of the amount and type of power possessed by a leader and how it's used. That was the definition. So it seemed like in this one, power and influence kind of were interchangeable, is how they did it, from how I understood it. And so it said that the influence when support or cooperation is needed. So how and why. So I thought that it kind of put me in the mind of, I'm trying to think what I had in my head before the break. I wrote everything else down. The different ways that you can influence people, like earlier when we were talking about you could influence them to do something through disciplinary actions, or you could influence them through whatever motivates them, whether it be, like, I always think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, whether you're meeting their needs, and just the amount of power that you actually have over them, or authority to make decisions over them, and then how you go about making that decision, or how you go about influencing them to support whatever your goal is.
Good. And it wasn't planned, but yeah, Brittany, it went right back to your definition of leadership, did it not? With, talking about the power and using a force, if you will. To be clear, the power isn't necessarily like superhero power, if you will. It's more of I have a higher degree of decision rights. So my decision has more weight, if you will. I can decide whether or not you get a raise. I can decide whether or not you keep your job. I mean, so the decision rights power can be interchanged. The influence, oh, I didn't get your, did I get your opinion? I don't know if I got your opinion. What do you think about that?
My opinion is, I think it's very relevant. I think that's the way a lot of people lead that I've dealt with. So, I'm used to it, I guess.
Okay. I bet it's, I mean, especially in the military, yeah, it's going to be something that's more prominent on that. I like how you bring in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Again, that relates back to knowing your employer or the follower of that. When I've taught this in the past, power and influence has been the one that people identify leadership the most with, but have the biggest emotional connection with. Like, I got screwed over on this promotion because the boss did not want to give it to me. Right? It's the power of the decision right is often what's used as a negative description of the manager. You know, he just abuses or she just abuses the power. Do you find, does that connect at all? Because especially Brittany, going back, that's how you identified whether or not the person was a bad leader. Do you feel like there's an emotional investment with the power influence theory? Do you feel like you're tapping into the other person's emotions? That's why they're influenced? Because I have the power?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's in a positive way and sometimes it's in a negative way. It just depends on who that specific leader is. But I do think that it does deal with emotions.
Good. All right. Good job. Amanda, situational approach. What's the definition? Give us how or why, and then your opinion.
So situational approach is essentially leaders adapting their style and approach based off different situations. It's a very depends kind of theory in leadership. So it was kind of based off of a leadership theory created by Hershey and Blanchard, where, you know, leaders could have different types of approaches, as well as the audience they're leading can have different maturity levels of preparedness. So essentially, like I said, leaders just change their approach based on, you know, the situation. I personally think this is the best style, but this is also probably the style I would approach the most. You had mentioned that there were different types of examples for leadership, like testing, observation, or feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I related it a lot to like Howard did with Myers-Briggs, except which I have taken, but I actually related it back to a personal example. My company did a Discovery Insights,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to lead and talk to people really just depends on their type of personality and trait, and, you know, having that adaptability and flexibility of leading how, you know, other people perceive situations, I think is incredibly important.
Well, and Amanda, nice job on that. And again, wasn't planned, but yeah, that definition of theory fit into your definition. It depends on the situation and styles could vary. Let me ask you this question before we go into, does situational approach, does it complement, meaning support, builds off of trait approach of leadership, or is it just in the opposite direction? Like like trait states that there are traits that a leader must have, and it implies that you are a natural born leader. And then situational states that, well, each leader is different. They take a different style, based on the situation, implying that one leader could be good in one situation if they train, while another leader could be bad in that situation. So what do you think? Do you feel like they complement each other, in which the yin and the yang, they go together, but yet opposite, or are they just like completely opposite thoughts?
I don't think they're completely opposite thoughts, but I think if you knew how to talk to someone, just kind of relating it back to a personal example, if like I said, you have to understand discovery insights, but I am a green yellow. I am let's do this together and involve me type of person, but a lot of the leadership in my company are reds or blues. The reds definition is be brief, be brilliant, be gone. And so how I have to approach their style is I have to be direct. How they have to approach me is giving me a little more fluff. So I think it's a compliment, but I don't think they have to fight each other.
Okay. All right. So I'm glad you went back to that, because that's where I was going to go next, is with the example from your personal experience. And maybe I misunderstood you, but it sounded like the assessment that your employer gave identified the ideal traits, red, blue, green, yellow. Were those the,
yeah,
that would be a leader? Is that
there's leadership traits among all colors. There's good days, there's bad days.
Okay.
But it's how you approach each person that gets your point across more effectively, which I think situationally is what makes a good leader. If I knew my boss was a red, I'm going to give him a 1 to 2 sentence description, and that's how we're going to lead this conversation. If he was approaching me, he'd give me a paragraph. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just situational.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that, then thank you, I understand it. I have worked for employer CEOs in which they have given such assessments, and it's been too long. I can't remember what, I'll look it up though. I still have it. But at the end of the assessment was so comprehensive that the CEO could look at this assessment and state, yeah, this person would be a good manager. This person would be a good employee. And as an educator, that I was always troubled by that. And so I wanted to make sure that we're on the same, well, I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly in that case, because if you are not, let's say, I don't know this assessment you gave, but if the reds are the ones that would traditionally have less problems with maybe making the decision rights or decisions that would be deemed powerful, but a green is like, oh, they would stew about that. You know, they could still make it, but they would stew about that. Should the greens never be a CEO? And again, I don't know the assessment.
So essentially this assessment is kind of like a Myers-Briggs. It kind of takes your good traits, it takes your bad traits. It's not saying a green can't be a CEO, and it's not saying all CEOs are reds. It's just, it's more of a communication style and adapting how you approach situations based off this styles. Okay,
so, but you stated that, and again, this is good, you stated that your boss, who's a red-blue, they may write follow-up and evaluation in a paragraph, while you would have to, it would take several paragraphs. And I'm paraphrasing. If I'm off base, just correct me on that. But so let's say the roles are flipped. Mm-hmm. Are you stating that you now have to be a paragraph writer as in that position? Because the organization is used to that type of leadership if they are your boss. How do we make that? Do you have to change, or does the organization change?
I don't think anybody has to change. I think you have to adapt. Like, so let me give you an example.
But isn't it I'm sorry to interrupt, but adaptation, I feel like we're saying the same thing. I don't mean, by adapting, I am changing. If I'm heading in this direction, I got to get from A to B, and my car breaks down. I was driving my car. Now I'm walking. I'm still heading to B, but I've adapted. Definitely is a change of pattern. So I think I want to make sure I'm saying the same thing as you, is what I'm stating.
Okay.
But who's adapting? Are the followers adapting, or are you adapting?
You both have to adapt. How can you be a leader if you can't adapt?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
You both do.
Okay, good. Howard, chime in on this, because this is good. Amanda's needing a break from Dr. H. I can see it.
I'm really enjoying your guys' conversation. So continue. And as you guys, so I really like the idea of a value-based approach. There's one exception, and I'll get to it quickly, but the concept that as your environment changes, you have to acclimate again. I think that's extremely relevant in business and in leadership, especially to your stakeholders, which are your executives, and then your support. With all that said, the exception is there does become a bottom line. There does become that kind of that no nonsense rule that must be followed to protect the value of the organization. And I think that while you guys are both right, yes, you have to evolve. The organization has to grow. There also has to be a sense to protect the most valuable asset there, and that's either the employee or it's the organization, or it's a combination of the two. So I think you have to really cherish those things while keeping in perspective that you have to grow and develop, and be sure that you're value-based.
Does
that make sense?
No, it does. It makes and I don't want to. Again, I hope that I'm not coming across as argumentative with Amanda. I'm kind of, a question pops up that's heading in the direction that I want to go, and so challenging it. But thank you for refereeing and stepping in on that. So that's nice. Brittany, we got someone on your lap, and I want you to have an opportunity to speak too. But maybe you want to introduce us to your guest there.
This is my daughter Kirsten. You want to say hi?
Hi,
She's
Kirsten. How old are you, Kirsten?
Tell them how old you are. Tell them how old you are. Hurry up, I'm in class.
I'm the number 5, and I'm this age.
So she's 5? Is she 5?
Uh-huh.
And she's this age, so she measured herself based off. That's awesome. That's great. I've never heard that before. That's so awesome. Nice job. That's good. All right, let's see if Mom can do just as well as you did in answering the question. I'm sure she can, but so you've heard different perspectives, and basically we're talking about, going back to trait leadership, and going to situational. Where do you stand on this? And we're talking about adapting, and how do you feel?
So in my experience, I've seen it both ways. One time where a leader tried to adapt to the followers, and then most times in my experience is always the leader just leading the way in their own style and the followers having to adapt. The thing I noticed that played into it the most was the shift in morale. If it's a completely different leadership style and people aren't used to it, it shifted morale. Morale actually went down a majority of the time because it was just too much change for people at one time. And then other times when the leader did try to shift and lead the way he felt like the previous leader led, or he felt like people wanted him to lead and it wasn't organic to that person, they pretty much failed as a leader. They became a people pleaser rather than a decisive leader. So in my opinion, I think that a leader should lead in the style that's organic to them, and then motivate people to want to follow them. And it may be rough in the beginning, but if you're a good leader, which is subjective, but if you are an effective leader, you can still reach the goal leading in your own style. That's just what I think.
Right, and that's and all three of you together, everything you've said brings me to my point. And I know Amanda didn't mean it this way, and so please don't interpret it, because I know I could see by her putting her head up and down that there was a degree of agreement there. I'm just sharing my experience from that. Is I have conformed to the organization. I have adapted my style to meet that organization. I have gone the opposite way, in which my way or the highway. I've done it both. And I will agree completely that with the style that I went with, I'm going to adapt to the organization. It became, all the work was on me. I was the boss that wouldn't ask them to do anything, if you will. I did it all right? I was pleasing them. When I went with the opposite, my way or the highway, I lost everybody. You know, I didn't have a staff anymore. So I spent my whole time hiring people. And then my boss was like, what happened to this person? This person was great. Why did you lose them? It's a tightrope, right, that you have to walk. But here's the thing is adapting. Brittany said it best in the sense that it's the reason it's called an organization, that it is also organic. Okay. It's going to evolve. It's going to have to change. It cannot, it will be out of business if it doesn't grow anymore or nurture itself. But you can't change the stripes of the person. You can educate the person. They can develop new stripes. They can grow. But if you want somebody who has spots and they have stripes, you're not changing the stripes into spots. So there will be a time. Adapting also means that I need to make decisions that are hard, that some people have to go. So Amanda, I would say, no, you write how you write. You don't adapt. And by you saying that they have to adapt to you, some people will like the brief paragraphs. No, this might not be the organization for them. That's fine. It's quality of life. It's not an easy thing if you have to fire somebody. It's never easy, but most of the time, employees, if they have been trained properly and know what expectations are, they will fire themselves.
I agree with you. So I'm working on trying to make myself more clear here. So the example I was given was more in reference to communication as a leader.
And I agree with you on that. All right. That was the example I gave on communication based on what you were saying. And take communication aside, I'm trying to say I take that person who's a different leader and I replace them with you. Communications, behaviors, what have you. Who adapts, who changes. And
I think everybody.
Right. I'll agree with that. Everybody has to change. However, you don't want to change so much that you lose sight of what you believe good leadership is, right? Now, good leadership in that organization could not be the right leadership, you know? And so it is subjective, and we repeat that over and over again on that. So I interrupted you, Amanda. Did you want to add something else? I don't want you to go away going, oh, that Dr. H.
No, this is good. I like the fruitful discussion because I think it helps us grow and learn. You know, I'm not a lecture person. I'm a discussion person. That's how I learn.
Good. All right, this is, all right, so it fits. I just don't want you to change who you are because you're awesome. And, you know, forget them if they can't read 6 paragraphs or what have you. So, all right, so let's move on. We've had our break. Howard, you were talking about value-based. Did you want to give us an explanation of value-based a little bit before we go?
I think I had just I was looking at it, but thinking situational. So I think I just alluded to it. But some of the value-based approach, because I just kind of glanced over it. I like that style too. Actually, it places a great deal of responsibility on values. What's the moral, the core. The person or the organization. So I kind of do like that approach as well. But I think it takes a great deal of responsibility because you have to be in tune with those things.
If I would ask, and thank you, Howard, for chiming in on that. If I ask everybody to list an organization that they know of that has strong leadership in there, we can all probably, bring up several businesses that have patriarchs or matriarchs of the organization that make us, that's a good leader there. And often employees and followers will follow suit. All of those theories, again, the only thing they have in common is the process of influence, right, on leadership. And they all will need, if you look at the trade approach as the baseline, the foundation, they've all built off that. And so you're going to have to be, you could apply all those theories to any organization. What I value about the value base is it hits upon the major decision that you have as an employer, as a leader, is you have the decision rights of who joins your organization, and you need to treat those decision rights as gold. And the value-based approach states that I'm going to find individuals, or I'm going to train individuals that meet the best value as a leader, in my opinion, that will grow the organization. That my leadership is based upon a sense of value that's going to be unquestionable, and I want followers to support those values. Well, that all brings back down to who you hire. And you'll hear this often again, is that the most important decision you have as a manager, as a leader, as an executive, is who you bring on to the organization, for two reasons. One, that person that you bring on means more work for you. Means like I have to train you and I have to do my job, time and a half. Second, if that person does not work out, does not meet, you have to go through that process again. And that cost is real. And it's something that eats into your time. And you're all about efficiency and effectiveness. So you want to be selective. Now, when I hire somebody and I feel they're the right, I'm all in. I double down. I'm going to train you and coach them up. But it's something I've learned the hard way, is I'd rather go with the position open than to have to fill it with somebody that I'm going to have to train, because I'm looking for somebody with spots and they have stripes. I'm not going to get a marker out and draw. I don't know what that means. Anyways, good job. All right. So give me a second. I want to join it. We're going to go into chapter 2 content. We're at 8:22. Let me stop sharing this and I want to get this queued up. Now, you may have seen this before. This is about a 20-minute video that we'll watch and then discuss, because it feeds into chapter 2's. Well, let's go into chapter 2 a little bit. Let's do this. Let's set this up here. All right. So chapter 2 goes into yeah, I'm still recording. How should a leader behave? And now we've been able to answer and define leadership, and we agree that it deals with a process of influence. We also identify the importance of traits of a good leader. We also recognize what good versus bad leadership is about. Euclid and Martin, if you look at page 22 of chapter 2, state that experts have been studying leadership behavior for decades upon decades, but they still have not been able to create an agreed upon behavioral categories, if you will. Like what are the behaviors necessary? And a lot of it is because we already talked about it. It's subjective to the leader, the situation, yada, yada, yada. Therefore, the number of leadership behaviors is infinite. Now, they bring it down to the most common ones. The ones task-oriented behavior, adverse relation-oriented behavior. And you could look into this as, task-oriented, primarily concerned with accomplishing the tasks of the organization, the efficiency, the reliability. Relationship-oriented behavior is primarily concerned with increasing mutual trust, cooperations, job satisfaction, identification with that. The task-oriented, you're going to find more of the planning incidents. You're going to find more of the basis of action-based plans. The types of leadership, other types of change-oriented behaviors, communicating and appealing vision of what could be changed. Empowering participant leadership is specific types of empowering decision procedures, including consultation, joint decisions. So this is going to be more of empowering and delegating. The one that I like to talk about the most, because it doesn't give enough, is this transformational leadership, transformative leadership. What do we mean by that? Transformative leadership. And whether it's the textbooks or your definition is fine. Amanda, you want to take a shot?
To be honest, I've never thought about it.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Well, let me help out on this. So transformational leadership is the leadership that takes over, just in its word, an organization, and then will transform it, a change agent, if you will. In my opinion, we want to strive to be transformative leaders. And that is because we're dealing with the legacy of our organization. If I state that I want you to create a legacy system, that means I want you to create a system, a process, an organization that if you leave, the next person comes in, can just take the keys, turn, and keep the car going. How often do we think about our legacy as a leader? And that's what transformational leadership is about making sure that we can not only meet the targeted goals and outcomes in the current state, but assure that we're going to reach it 15 years or even after we're gone. So you would hear that from me as an executive. A good example is what we're working on right now in Baker University is we have a shared drive. And the shared drive, I don't know if you've experienced the shared drive's on the server. We all have access to it. And if we want to save something, we put it on this shared drive. Well, the shared drive's been in existence for over 10 years. There are people who have come and have gone, and there are names on there that I don't know anything about. So if someone says, oh, it's on the shared drive, I can't find it. So I state that let's take this, let's organize the shared drive in a fashion that anybody who comes in can make sense of it. So we've tried to break it down into our job responsibilities. We've tried to break it down into a naming convention. I wish I would have something to say like, hey, we accomplished it. We're still working on it. That's the example that comes in mind is what type of transformative leadership is necessary for us to leave our mark, if you will. Now, I'm not sure, do you keep to-do lists? How many of you keep to-do lists? Just raise your hand if you do. Brittany, Amanda, or all of us? Okay, great. Amanda, no, I picked on you last time. Brittany, how do you do your to-do list? Describe this process to me.
Well, I make a to-do list for my to-do list, and then I eliminate down to my to-do list. It's got categories and days and sometimes times, and it's probably over detailed. I don't know.
It's your to-do list. So that's good. There's like questions about it. Howard, you kind of did a half delayed to-do list response here. Do you tell us about your to-do list?
We have a formal to-do list. We use project management tool Asana, and then I do my own to-do list because I'm not a big fan of. Well, I won't say I'm a big fan. I like laying new track, as one of our executives likes to put it. But I also like to get work done too. So I like bullet statements. I like quick bullet statements, and I just like to check them off.
Right.
So, I use a Google. Google has this awesome thing on the right-hand side. You can put it up there, and as you just chip away at them, you just check it off, and it saves into your archive. It's pretty sweet.
Nice. Yes. I like your answer on that. Is like, because I can only imagine what the project management software is, probably the level of detail. Is that what it is with the timeline? And
yeah, you can spend more time transcribing your work than you actually do doing the work itself.
Right.
So it can be a headache. That's all.
And that's a running joke I use in class too. That's interesting, because I'll say, how many of you will create the to-do list and feel like you've actually accomplished something, and then, oh, let's go get a cup of coffee and we'll come back because, I got everything organized. Well, you haven't accomplished a darn thing. You just wrote everything down that you need to. And so it's, and you hit upon why you want to keep that. Amanda, you raised your hand. Tell us about your to-do list.
It's decently crude. I literally just have to keep a running tab of everything because so much stuff gets thrown at me during the day.
Mm-hmm.
I put it in a thing and just goes down from there,
Good.
Which prompted me to make my own work to-do list for tomorrow. So thank you.
Nice. Good. I had a professor once state that he asked the question, you know why we keep notes, right? And of course, no one answered because they didn't know if they're supposed to be keeping notes or not. And he says, we keep notes so we can forget. And now that, once you hear that, it kind of takes on a different appreciation of your time. It's like, I'm taking notes so I can forget to go back. The authors of their text talk about to-do lists. They don't go into details of to-do lists, but they do go into planning, the different types of plans. And the one thing that they're consistent on is that planning is the cognitive exercise. It doesn't lead to productivity, but it's the cognitive exercise of clearing your thoughts, if you will, clearing the direction. You have to have a plan in order for you to have a comparison. Again, I go back to the key performance indicators. You must always have a foundation. So whether you want to go into details like Brittany, who has levels on levels, which I've done that, or if you just want, Howard's bullets, likes to check it off, you just have to have a plan in order for you to have a level of productivity of that. Basically, that's the message of that. So with that, I want to go into, because it sets up well this video on from Mark Horstman's. I don't know if you're familiar with Manager Tools podcast or website, but it's a really good source to go to for this information. So let me stop sharing and then. All right, so this takes about 22 minutes. Take some notes, and we're going to come back and have a discussion on this. So hopefully this works. Can everybody hear the video?
Good morning. Bonjour. That picture was taken many years ago when I was young. I'm thrilled to be here today. I have to teach you everything I know about management in 20 minutes, which is easy because
Mark. All right. Thoughts?
I'll go ahead and start. A couple of things out of the gate that sorry, are you looking for feedback? Thoughts? Is that good?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay,
Thoughts, feedback, takeaways, debates, whatever you want to do.
So a couple of things in the beginning. I was really kind of caught off guard when he said, first off, he was talking about managers, not leaders, it seems like, as he was referring to. But he was definitely, when he spoke about the value of fair and friendly, or being a friend, and how maybe that's not a good value to hold on to. And then results and retainability. Those are two things that you kind of think of, but sometimes I think you can lose focus on. So the one thing that I think that he spoke to that our organization does not do a good job of, speaking from experience, is they do not vet employees. They've had a pretty high turnover lately, and I think that a lot of their challenges, they're trying to fill roles quickly so they can keep the train moving. They don't do a good job of vetting. Like he suggested, 8 to 10 interviews before you pick a candidate. I just thought that kind of spoke to our organization's maybe missteps or challenges, because we're always trying to, their goal is to always produce. So you need people there to help produce, be part of the production team.
Good. Thanks, Howard. That was good. Who wants to go next? Amanda? Brittany?
Sure. Overall, I thought it was a really interesting video. There were a couple things that I didn't necessarily agree with. He essentially said teams don't exist. And I believe he was talking more of in a context of, treating people more individually. But I feel like from my experience, to get things done, although an individual is getting work done, I feel teams are incredibly important in understanding on, how to work collaboratively together, even if you don't necessarily agree. I think that it builds a strong team, and I think it builds trust, assuming you do have quality work and a positive relationship coming out of people. But I understood his perspective. I just didn't necessarily agree with it. And then I also didn't necessarily agree with his approach that people are all the same in context of globally. I had extensively researched Gert Hofstede's research, which really does classify different countries and how they interact on a level. So, saying someone from Asia wants to be treated like an American, I don't necessarily agree with, although you should treat them cordially. There's a difference there, and it needs to be respected. But overall, I think what he said was really, really good. I do think you need to understand what results you get, and then keeping and retaining the people you work with. And I agree with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting about I must have missed the global comment. I'll go through his transcript to see, but I took his approach is that it doesn't matter where they come from, you still have to treat them in the same manner of getting to know them and knowing what they're about. Because you're absolutely right. You know, the one downfall for international, especially for Americans growing businesses abroad, is just a failure to respect and understand the culture of the country that they would be going into. And more significant is the fact that the family that the manager has aren't able to adapt to that culture. So that's interesting insight. And I've watched this video many times. And so that one, I'm going to have to go back and see if he says that directly. So if I can clarify, but good work. Brittany?
My thoughts were, where was this video 2 years ago? I had a daycare and I had extremely high turnover, trying to figure out how to hire and manage people and train at the same time. So, treating everyone differently. I thought that was interesting because that was one of the things that I struggled with, as weird as that was, the fact that I did treat everyone differently. And I thought it was a problem because I had always been, maybe not directly, but indirectly through listening to other things or readings and things, just taught to treat people the same, but it was in a different context. So then to be treating people differently, and it's obvious that you are, but it was weird. It was weird to me, even though the people that it wasn't like a negative different. It was just everybody needed something different from me. And some people needed more than others. And I felt bad not giving the people who didn't require a lot as much attention as the ones who did, but they just didn't need it. So that was, it was good to hear because it was weird when it actually happened to me. And, let's see, when he was saying, do you know what your boss expects from you? That was interesting to me because my whole team, we have a team that's 5 of us, and we don't necessarily know what our boss expects from us. Like maybe 1 or 2 of us do, but for the most part, we don't. And we're all okay with that, weirdly. So just when he was like, most people want to know what their boss expects, and I guess the audience kind of agreed for whatever reason, we'd rather be, and most of us came from military backgrounds. One of the people on our team, he's a student hire with the government, and so he's still in college, so he's pretty young. But we just would rather not even know what you expect than to be micromanaged, is how we look at it. So, but that was my takeaways.
No, that's good. And the 3 of you take different approaches. I want to go back to Howard's comment about that he used the reference of managers. But before I do that, I lost my train of thought. So let's go back with Howard. Are you stating that there's no, were you able to find any qualities towards leadership in his video?
Me?
Yeah.
Sorry, what's the question?
Were you able to find anything related to leadership in his video? Or is it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So while he used the term manager, I felt like the idea that you have a one-on-one, even if it's 30 minutes a week with your employees, I think that that's a good characteristic of a strong leader.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like, just play off of words, it seems like his context or his talk was motivated in the sense that, hey, whatever organization you're going to be at, we want you to manage the organization, do a good job of facilitating for that organization, and maybe you don't necessarily have to lead all your individuals and mentor every single person, but rather manage it, make sure that it's a humming machine, Well, I'm reading way more into it than what it actually is, but that's kind of what I got out of it.
No, I don't. I think it's broad enough for you to read, and that's what the goal would be. And that's especially for the classes, to critically think about this video. I think his advice is a good baseline for any new manager. I don't think it's the end all. It also talks about, going back to Brittany's comment about what Yuko Martin says, that some employees don't need strong leaders. They just need to be left alone and let them do. They have a strong drive within them. So when they have Brittany, you were stating about a boss that didn't, and what's your boss expectations? You were fine not knowing the expectations because you had a strong personal core that motivates you and drove you. It's really what it brings down is the example that leadership is knowing your employees, knowing the resources you have, and utilizing them in a way that will, or influencing them in a way that will reach the goals of the organization. So, all right, so we're at 9:06, and I had another activity, but I want to show another video because I think it's going to be a good contrast. I had both videos scheduled, but so if you want to take a couple minutes to get something to drink or readjust, I'll cue this video up and we'll have one more discussion, then we'll call it a night. So.
Hey, Dr. Haskins,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you a quick question.
Sure.
How old are your children?
I have a 16-year-old, 14-year-old, and a 8-year-old. She'll be nice.
When I saw the Roblox on your home screen, it instantly, like, I can't keep my kids away from my phone or computer because the Roblox is a big deal in our house, you know?
Yeah, that's
stood out.
That's my daughter's. I got to clear that stuff out. I haven't been on my computer. I was working from my laptop all day, and so thank you for bringing that to my attention.
No, I was just curious what age. I didn't know how long that'd been there.
That's my daughter, and she talks to my girlfriend's daughter, and so it's a whole world of conversation going on. So,
well, especially now. I mean, it's what they got, right? It's about all they have these days.
Exactly.
All right, cool.